Can you say hard hats, folks? Hard hats, lunch pail, steel toe boots.
Anything short of a championship this year is a failure. Look at this boomer right here.
You've just got so much talent here.
Somebody said we need to apologize for Jalen.
Can I close it, John? What are we apologizing for? What did we say? What did we do?
Hey, this is Noah, and I'm here with Bob Manning, and we are here to discuss the Olympic win over France and the fact that we had 3 Celtics performances to discuss as well, but I think right now the Celtics are not honestly front of mind from what we just saw. I don't know, Bobby, what are your initial thoughts to the really just astounding last 3 minutes there that we just saw from Steph Curry? I think that's kind of the most front of mind thing for anybody that watched that game.
Yeah, I haven't pulled up X Twitter or anything like that, so I don't know who they do an MVP award now. I would have to imagine he won it. I guess LeBron could have too, so it'll be interesting to see which one of them comes away with it. But he was the story of the last 2 games here. I know I wasn't on last game, but that was a real iconic moment for his career. And then to follow it up with this tonight, this is exactly what you were looking for from him, because this is his first Olympics. He hasn't had the opportunity to do this. Had a bit of a slow start to the first couple games there, but just classic stuff from him. The celebrations, the fire, the shooting, of course. It's just ridiculous last game, especially 9 for 14. I mean, no one else can do that. No one else can do the stuff he does. And now it's crazy for a guy who accomplished so much before that 2022 finals. Just over the last 3 years here, we're seeing him get his first Olympic gold medal and his first finals MVP. So amazing stuff from him late in his career.
Yeah, I mean, that was insane. Watching him, it was 4 threes in the last, 2.5 minutes. And after, on the heels of, the most recent game where I feel like people kind of counted him out because he struggled a little bit during the pool play games and just hadn't found his rhythm. And then I don't think they're here without him. I mean, I don't even, they don't beat Serbia, and I don't know if they win tonight. I mean, they probably win tonight, but he was just so instrumental. It's hard to really talk about anything else considering just the individual greatness that we just watched. Was just trying to see if there's anything on that MVP count. I would imagine it has to be Steph. I think LeBron might get it. Just
that would be my vote.
Steph would be your vote?
Yeah.
And I think there were other people that stood out from this game as well. I mean, I've been so impressed by Devin Booker throughout this tournament. I know he hasn't been one of the stars, but he has been the 4th guy to LeBron, Durant, and Steph that's just been able to be a role player. And I guess he was that in the last Olympics too, but I don't know that people necessarily would have been able to count on him as being that guy, just doing all the little things, hitting open shots. He, to me, has been the biggest star of this tournament from a kind of raising his own stock standpoint, maybe. But everybody else has been kind of had their moments, but then they've been quieter some games. Obviously, Embiid was huge in the last game, didn't do much tonight. Bam had his game. Anthony Edwards had his game, but I think a lot of those other players had a moment, but Devin Booker was the other one that stood out just throughout the tournament, just being really, really consistent and probably that 4th guy.
Yeah, and he claimed that role pretty early and just rolled with it, which I don't think any of us were sure he was going to be able to do. It was pretty amazing to see him do it. And the shooting's just ridiculous, especially when we talk about Tatum, and we'll get to Tatum pretty quickly here. The difficulty of making the most of just a couple attempts, 2 for 4 for Booker in this one. We're only talking about 4 more shots tonight, so 22 3-point attempts for Booker over this stretch here, and he's shooting 60% on them. So that's hard to do, and he's done it. Durant's done it. Curry, of course, has the greater volume, but he's maintained this effective run that he's been on after a slow start over the last couple of games here. That's just hard to do because of how limited your touches are, how limited your opportunities are to have the ball in your hands and get things going if you are cold. And that's the one thing I'm going to probably remember most about this. They definitely got pushed. I think tonight showed more than anything, because I came into this game saying, all right, are they underperforming a little bit during some of these stretches, or, of course, this last game where they almost lost, or is the world pushing them that hard? And I think this game, again, confirmed that the world is pushing them that hard. So we've had to see them figure things out. There was definitely internal dynamics on this team and egos and roles and minutes and all the things we've talked about here that they had to figure out. And that made it interesting. We've watched so many of these teams in the past just roll. I, of course, was at the women's game the other night, Noah, and that's what the men used to look like. It was just a snooze fest. there was real intrigue in this game. There was all-time intrigue in that last game. And so much of it came down to the U.S. just having to figure it out, play to play, quarter to quarter. And they did it. And it was impressive to watch them do it because it happened on the fly. Like late in this game, Bam's in that closing lineup, not looking good. And then they shift to Davis, and he's on the offensive glass. And he's another guy who really impressed me on this run, just how impactful, consistent, energetic he was. So it's a fun team to watch. If you're a Celtics fan, you're pissed. You're you're not loving how it went for all your guys for much of this run. But
You think?
if you're a fan of basketball, this was really fun to watch. Yeah, I mean, come on, Noah. I know he played a little bit tonight, but you don't love how this went for Tatum if you're a Celtics fan.
Yeah, no, but here's the thing, though. The one thing I'll say, and I agree, and we can talk. I mean, we'll talk more about the Tatum stuff, but there was also 3 Celtics players that were on this team, and I feel like at a point, like Celtics fans that were like, I'm now rooting against Team USA. Like, even if you're just team first and you don't care about the country at all or whatever, there's still 2 other Celtics fans that presumably
Celtics players, yeah.
Yeah, and Drew Holiday, I mean, was really important to this team in particular. And Derek White had his moments. Obviously, didn't play tonight, but he wasn't just like the 12th spot that didn't do anything all Olympics. He was important. And Drew Holiday hit a big 3 down the stretch there, and just defensively it was critical throughout this Olympic run. So I don't know. I feel like maybe Celtics fans are Tatum fans, and there is some overlap. And I know fans take their franchise players really seriously, but there also were other guys that were a big part of this. But I get it. I mean, the Tatum storyline just became so insane. Like, it's honestly hard to fathom how scrutinized. Like, at one point, I was like, he's standing in the corner and like he's catching the ball, and the entire world is ready to tweet about it. You know what I mean? Like, if he misses a shot right now, it's like everybody's clowning it. This is why he didn't play. If he makes a shot, it's like, Steve Kerr, why have you been hiding him? Like, it's just you can't have that much scrutiny over every little thing on the basketball court, because down the stretch there, like LeBron had turnovers, Curry had a turnover, like everybody made mistakes, everybody had bad plays, and I feel like with Tatum, it was like everything that he did was like times 100 the way that it's being received in the world right now. It's a little bit wild.
Yeah, it's unreal how big that story became, because the first time it was pretty big. The second time, where we're in the knockout stage and everybody's watching and everybody's in Paris, all eyes turn toward that decision, especially coming off the championship run that he just had and the notoriety internationally as a star he's earned. I tweeted out and I put in my story today. I was at a concert last night and we met this guy from Germany, and one of the first things he said to us was, "Can you believe Kerr benched Tatum?" He was pissed. And people all over Paris were, and people all over the internet. Players thought it was stupid. Bob Cousy weighed in. Wick was mad about it. I mean, this was the benching heard around the world. It truly was. And I think it says something about Tatum and how people perceive him across the board in the basketball world, especially because I feel like it was a lot of players, a lot of people around the league, a lot of analysts, people who are keyed in, who are like, how can you not find any time for him? And so I respect that. My take has been that he didn't play well enough to earn the minutes, but when it's, Jamal Crawford, Grant's going to have his back, Cousy, being a Celtics guy, I'm sure that plays into it. But I feel like a lot of more neutral voices were also looking at this and saying, really? But of course, you had his mom and dad weighing in too here. But as far as tonight goes, I thought he was okay. And that's all they needed from him. He came in, made a couple of nice defensive digs at the ball, disrupted some plays, got that run out in short order there. And that was another nice moment from Curry, setting him up for that. And then, of course, just not able to get the shot off in a couple different situations. The 3 he missed, finishes 0 for 10 in this run here from 3. And that play where he had Yabu lined up was tough. Those are the kind of plays from this run where I'm like, man, you got to beat your guy one-on-one in those situations. There's so few situations that you're going to have the ball in your hands lined up. He's 10, 15 feet from the basket there, and you just got to take Yabu. I know Yabu has had a magical run here, but that was tough. But overall, I don't know, C+ for Tatum in this game, if I would put a grade on it. Better than what we've seen. He got to play, but it wasn't anything extraordinary.
No, and the thing is like he's in that spot now where he's not going to I don't think he feels like he should be taking the ball and doing a whole lot. He was very passive throughout this entire Olympic run. And we're not used to seeing that. We're used to seeing Tatum the focal point of the offense and drawing all the attention and being the facilitator. And I think at the end of the day, like this whole discourse around him might just come back to the fact that he just wasn't a great fit on this roster. Like the things that he's good at was a little bit duplicative. And I'm not saying I do think that he should have played. I think the DNPs were a little bit extreme. And I do think that like there was no reason. I felt to me that Steve Kerr made decisions before the game and then just stuck to them, even when things weren't going well. Like he was like Tatum's not playing against Serbia, and that's what kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I think that's what maybe some people didn't like. But ultimately, like he wasn't really needed on this roster, and he was needed on the 2021 roster, and he'll probably be needed on the 2028 roster. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't reflect on him not being a great player. We know he's a great player. He's a great fit on the Celtics, but on this particular team, he was the odd guy out, and hopefully that doesn't destroy his confidence. I don't think that it will. He's, if I had to bet on it, Isaiah Thomas, I saw just tweeted, I think Tatum's going to win MVP next year. I don't think he's going to win MVP, but I do think he's going to have a great season next year. And if anything, he'll use this as fuel and motivation. And he didn't spend the whole summer celebrating. He spent the whole summer dealing with all this. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting conundrum here. But I do feel like this whole story might just come down to the fact that on this roster, like there were other forwards that have way more experience with Olympic play that are more, pure scorers, and he was just going to be in this position that he's been in. And, I hope he didn't hate the whole experience. Hopefully he still found some value in it and he won a gold medal. And, we don't really have no idea what he's actually thinking. I think a lot of people think that by his parents tweeting that he should have played, that's like him telling them to. I don't necessarily think that. I think it might just be them going, maybe going a little unhinged. So we don't really know how he's feeling. And maybe one day he'll do a sit down and tell everybody exactly what this summer was like for him.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear more about it. The limited comments we've seen, you've gleaned frustration from that, and he certainly has said the right things in terms of only caring about the winning here. But there's no way you can be thrilled about it, especially with how you would have imagined he would want to be part of this team going into it. No one wants to sit for a whole game, never mind 2 out of the run here. So that wasn't great. I think he called it humbling. So that's good to hear. There'll certainly be an inspirational factor for it, and he needs it. I do think he's going to have to go back to the lab with some of the things in terms of his shot creation. And that's the only thing I think you look at here from this run. Because, listen, we all know the differences in FIBA. We all know the situation, the role he's on with this team. And we've talked about the rhythm thing over and over and over again. I think the only thing you look at here that extends from the playoffs is the three-point shooting and where his shots are going to come from this season. And I'm interested to see how that goes. Does he work into the mid-range a little bit more? I think that's something that it looked like he lacked here, that maybe he could have found some offense in that area. The finishing is something I certainly still feel good about. And the one-on-one play probably isn't going to be a problem for him because he draws crowds so often, and he's able to get the pass off. I think during this run you saw some nice passing from him too. So I'm not panicking with Tatum here, but I do think the tough part is, Noah, as I've said a number of times here, is if you're going to be a fan of his who believes he's the best player in the world and he's better than his peers and he's the guy in this league going forward, face of the league, whatever you want to say, it's tough to look at what he did here and say, that's the guy. Now, I also understand that this team was about Curry, LeBron, Durant, those kind of guys coming in. And this wasn't just an obligatory gesture toward those guys. Those guys carried this team. And it is indicative of where that hierarchy at the top of the league is right now. You have your Giannis's and Jokic, who are clearly a cut above. You still have your LeBrons and Currys and Durant's trying to hang on, and those guys can still play at such a high level here. And then you have your Tatums and Edwards of the world here who are firmly in that class. Are they going to shoot up to Giannis, Jokic level in the next couple of years here? Or are they like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys here, which I think is probably the most fair place to put them. Looking at performances like these for those guys. And Booker, I think you put into that category as well here. So I don't know. It's disappointing if you love Tatum, if you want to see this be his victory lap for the Olympics here. It's definitely not a panic moment for where he's at here. But there certainly does need to be some work. And as you said, there's some fuel to the fire here for him to go into next season playing at a higher level.
Yeah, and I guess maybe part of my thing with it, because I know obviously we've been asked about this so much, and it's been the big story of the Olympics, honestly. Like I feel like thinking about where media coverage was, where the online discourse was, like the Tatum DNP's thing was almost as central as anything else. I just don't really buy into like ranking players that much. I know it's a part of the game, so people do it.
Oh, I love it.
So I just find like it's really just hard to compare players of different positions and at different points of their career and different roles. So I like a lot of the discourse. I think the reason people are frustrated is because they're like, this is bad for Tatum's like top 5 case, or this is bad for his whatever standing in the league. And I just don't like the Olympics being used to determine standing in the NBA, because that's not what it's about. It's about winning a gold medal and doing so as a team. And that's been like my frustration with the entire process, is that it's not supposed to be like, there's a lot of guys that if they were the top featured guy in the offense would have averaged 20 points in this Olympic team. Like there's probably 20 players in the NBA that could have played that role. And they weren't, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean that they're not great players. I think the thing with Tatum is that he didn't fit into the role player thing. Like he wasn't able to excel in the Devin Booker slot of just hitting threes and being comfortable in that position. And maybe that's just this particular roster. Maybe that shows us that maybe he's a guy that's so used to being the focal point that he's not used to playing alongside, so many stars the way that maybe we expected. Maybe it's exactly, it's the role that he was told to play in this, in this environment, and maybe he didn't have the buy-in from the coaching staff or whatnot. So there's a lot of different explanations, but I don't view this as like, this now shows us the Tatum's like his ranking in the world went down. I don't know. That's just me. I'm sure the whole world will probably disagree with that, and his rankings on all the lists are declining as we speak. But I feel like we just didn't see much of him at the end of the day. And me, I don't believe in shooting. I don't believe in looking at like a 11 shot sample to like make broad generalizations about someone's shooting. He's been struggling from his shot like throughout the last 6 months, and that's why I do think that's a valid conversation. But he never got into any sort of rhythm in these Olympics.
Yeah, it's baffling where that's at, and I'm interested to hear more about where that shot is at going into next year and see how he gets off to in the preseason and regular season first 10 game stretch there. Just see where it's at, because he'll certainly have many opportunities to get threes off in Boston, and he'll take them with confidence, and we'll just see where it goes, because last regular season he was pretty solid on a high volume number of threes there. 37 I think is what you're looking for a guy who's taken as many as he is here. So it's definitely perplexing, because it's been going on for so long. You thought it was just a slump he might come out of later in the playoffs. It never really subsided, and then he never hit one period during this run here. So that's the one thing you take from this and say, oh, all right, where's that going here? Because on this Celtics team, the style they play, the way Joe wants him to play, it is pretty central to who he is as a player here. And I've said, we actually saw it a little bit during some of the exhibition games. I'd love to see him playing close to the basket. Love to see him using his power game. Be a guy who's going to the free throw line 8, 9, 10 times a game, as he has in different spots over the last couple of years here, especially in the finals. He was so great around the basket in the finals. And he really is a power forward at this point, the way he's built, the way he's improved his game around the basket. So there's a balance there I think he has to strike. I think embracing a more expansive mid-range game, a floater especially. He had a floater opportunity in that Yabu sequence I mentioned, and it just hit right off the back of the rim. And I've seen him flash a nice floater at different points in his career, but last year that wasn't quite there as well. So it's tough, Noah, because he's shifted more toward passing, defense, rebounding, all the little things that keep him engaged in games when his scoring fluctuates. But at its heart, when you're a number one guy in this league, your scoring is also so central to what you're doing out there. And fortunately, they do have Brown, who's able to take on a lot of that load when Tatum goes cold from the field. But you just look back at those playoff numbers, 42 from the field, 28 from three. It's amazing they were able to sustain in spite of that and be so dominant. But they need him to be a little more efficient than that. And that's where you can, I think, criticize him coming out of this one, or at least expect him to be better, because the bar is high. I know, whether you want to do a list or not, his expectation is to be a guy on that level now, especially for a championship team. And he's been a little streaky as a scorer for a decent run now.
Yeah, and I think he'll be fine. I feel similarly about it as I do about the Al Horford shooting struggles of the previous playoffs, and how people were kind of like, oh, he just can't handle it. And then he came back and was obviously a good shooter this past year. But we can talk more about it. Let's do a quick break and let's hear from our friends over at Game Time.
I love going to MLB games during the summer, love going to concerts, games, sporting events, and there's no better way to get tickets to all of those events than the Game Time app. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. You can download the Game Time app, you can see any event that you search, you can put the location in of where you're based, see upcoming concerts, sporting events, whatnot, and get the best deals, best prices guaranteed. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. On top of the fact that it's already a really good deal, download the app, terms apply, redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. With PrizePicks, you could turn $10 into $1,000 while watching Team USA rack up the gold medal this summer. You can make a PrizePicks lineup of players across basketball, soccer, tennis, golf, and more in as little as 60 seconds. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat productions and you're locked in. So personally, I'm excited to watch Team USA compete in these next few games. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit matchup to $100. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks for a deposit matchup to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. So I do think we should zoom out a little bit on the broader story here, the broader picture, which is that at the end of the day, 3 Celtics players also just became Olympic gold medalists. For Holiday and Tatum, it's their second. For Derek White, it's his first. I think that's a remarkable thing in its own right that Derek White is an Olympic gold medalist after just who he was 5-7 years ago in his career as a player. And I do think Jrue Holiday and kind of solidified himself as one of the key guys in this team, more so than several others. And people deny this now, but when it was first announced that Holiday was going to be a priority on this roster, and that USA was already kind of making sure to get him before a lot of the other stars were solidified. A lot of people were like, Jrue Holiday, why Jrue Holiday? Like, there's a lot of better American guards, and that obviously aged terribly just because of who he is as a player, who he was all year. And then throughout this Olympic run, I thought that he was so important defensively, but then also offensively. He just looked super comfortable, and just kind of reminded everybody that he's he's not an offensive liability at all. He's an all-star, a multiple-time all-star, and he can be a leading scorer, especially when he has so little attention on him as he did in this Olympic run and obviously with the Celtics as well. But he really impressed. I mean, I watched him obviously the last Olympics, but it was fun to watch him after having seen him and gotten to know him and his game so much this past year. And he was one of the most important players, especially alongside Steph. I thought that he was able to kind of let Steph get away with things, get away with defensive mistakes or liabilities. And we heard from players all year that Jrue Holiday fixes so many things on the court that we don't even know, that there's things that just internally they recognize that if they mess up, Holiday can fix it. And I try to watch out for that stuff, but I think even we miss it sometimes, even looking for it. But he was really a standout, and I hope that his performance and just his role in this roster doesn't get overlooked, because winning a gold medal after being traded and winning a championship and then a gold medal right after, it's a pretty amazing way to spend your 6 months.
Yeah, and his steadiness from 3, as much as we make a big deal about the other aspects of basketball, so much of it does boil down to 3-point shooting in today's game. And you look at last year, 43 during the regular season on 5 attempts a game. Into the playoffs, he's still at 40 on 4.6. And on this roster, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I have to imagine he's well over 40 for this team. And in a game like tonight's, where he went in and out of involvement and moved to the bench in favor of Durant. So as we talk about your role fluctuating, that happens for him here too. And still, despite a bad foul here, a couple shaky plays late, first half hits a 3, second half hits a three, and those are just nice pacing baskets for this offense as they're running sets. I think both of them were in the half court, I want to say. So those are important. That's his most important skill because everything else is just such a staple for him. You know he's going to make good decisions with the ball more often than not. You know that he's going to bring the defensive pressure, and they needed it at times during this run. And he was instrumental when he was in the starting lineup. It's impressive to see just how steadily he produces, how even with a small role, as we talk about with some of the other guys here, his impact still feels large. And you look at the South Sudan game, especially, I think it was, where he and White are playing together. I think that's, if you are looking back on this whole run in its totality, not just a couple of Tatum benchings and this gold medal game here, that was a real moment where, again, international audience, a lot of people watching over the summer, get a good look in this environment at how dynamic of a guard combo that is. And speaking of rankings, forget the Tatum debate. You have a real case here, especially coming out of this and how impactful they both were at different points of that holiday. White backcourt ranking right up there with any other in the NBA right now. And that's a powerful tool for the Celtics to have. It says a lot too that, and I think I said this on an earlier show, Tatum and Brown, we've seen them for so many years now do what they do, for better, for worse. And we've seen both the highs and lows in their game carry the Celtics into constant contention, but also get them close and not quite there. It was really this backcourt in many ways this year. And Holiday replacing Smart, doing many of the same things Smart did, but bringing that shooting element to the backcourt. White getting his shot to a high level over the last 2 years here. That allowed them to become that championship team. And when you look at the way they accentuated the stars on this team when they were able to play, I just think it says all the things in the world about these two. And both extensions, I think you look at them, White extension more than the Holiday one, certainly, but crucial moves. You have to keep these guys around, involved, and hopefully, especially in Holiday's case, as he gets into his mid-30s here, he continues to be as effective as he's been here on this run and throughout last postseason, because these guys are just essential. This is stuff you didn't have before both of them arrived, and it changed everything for the Celtics when they got here. And you saw it on this team too. I don't think it was automatic that they were going to have as roles as large as they did. Maybe Holiday more so than White, but both ended up just being staples on this team. And again, Holiday wasn't at his best tonight, but still has 2 important threes on 4 tries.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was great across the board. I mean, he had a couple mistakes, like he had that offensive foul and maybe a turnover, but just defensively, the energy that he brings. Like, I started watching him just in help, and just the way that he was just compensating for the fact that there were defenders on the court that were making errors. And so I do feel like Holiday was one of the steadiest players of these Olympics. LeBron, I think, you have to kind of give him that award of the most steady, and Devin Booker would be up there as well. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right that if you're a Celtics fan, you're heading off of this Olympic run feeling even better about those extensions. If you weren't feeling, I mean, you should already have been feeling great about them after what we saw this year and what we saw during this playoff run. But yeah, I mean, I know that the narrative is going to continue around Tatum. I know that there's going to be a whole lot of discussion around, what his standing is, what his role is. Was he embarrassed? Was he humiliated? Like, it'll go on all summer. I'm really looking forward to training camp and getting to just hear from him, hear from others, and kind of move forward, because I do feel like the story just kind of lasted a very long time and maybe too long. But yeah, in a way, like Holiday and White were the difference between this year's team and previous year's teams. And so the fact that now they're in this role and kind of getting the credit for it with a gold medal and capping off this incredible year like that, it is very fitting. I don't know, anything else stand out to you that we should chat about before we wrap up here? It really was the Steph Curry game. It feels kind of disingenuous to talk about anything else after what we saw from him, but it also just, this whole run to me was just like, I feel really lucky to be watching and covering basketball at the same time as the apex of all these guys' careers and the overlap, and just, yeah, this roster that they assembled. As a fan of basketball, I think you have to have just loved it and just loved being around it.
Yeah, and they came through this, and it wasn't easy. They looked done with 5 minutes to go in that Serbia game, and they overcame it by playing the highest level of basketball you can imagine. For all the criticism he got, and I'm not going to praise him here because he certainly had mistakes, but I think Kerr did okay, trying to push the right buttons, trying to manage the egos. I know Warriors fans feel similarly about it too, despite all their success, because I've seen them all rip him left and right too. And so they're not feeling any better about Kerr than the U.S. fans and every individual player's fans are of this team. But they got it done. We very easily could have been having a completely different conversation on all-time failure and embarrassment and blah, 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 if a couple Serbia shots went down late there. But they tightened up defensively when they needed to. As you mentioned, those holiday sequences, the second unit sequences were really, I thought, just thrilling to watch right from the exhibitions, especially when they were going to some of those Bam Davis combinations. I think at different points when guys were struggling, other guys stepped up. Last game, Embiid, Curry, Durant. This game, LeBron, Curry. I think Holiday had his moments in this game too. Booker, of course. So, like, there's always this fluctuation on this team of guys getting involved when other guys were down. And I think there's just, with this team, a shadow of doubt that they overcame that made it more fun. And I think you look at all the guys here, especially the front runners, the guys who made it happen here. There's a victory lap for these guys, and they're still at a high level. But this is probably the last Olympic run in particular where they're going to be at this level. And to see them face some adversity, face some resistance, and overcome it, and be the guys who led that charge, I think was really fun to watch. And then, of course, in this game, Wembanyama, I think that was my favorite thing about this run here, was getting to watch a little bit more of him after the season he had. And he pushed it further. A couple upsets for that team. Not many expected them to beat Canada. Not many expected them to beat Germany. And he looked dominant as the central force of that team, even at points in this game. 1 point finishing right over Holiday in the post. That second or third chance point late that gave France a little bit of a chance. Some of the shooting from him in this game. Rebounding, defense, all the way down the line. I think his stat line for this Olympic was something close to 20, 10, 3, 2, and 2. So I hope he rests up. I hope he's got a leap ready for the second year. I hope the Spurs are more relevant around him, because, man, he is every bit the player he was hyped up to be. And it won't be long before he's in the same conversation as all of these guys here. He might already be, because he carried some serious weight tonight and throughout this run. So that was exhilarating to watch, especially in front of the home fans. That was another element to the last couple of games here for France, awesome. Being out here. Some great crowds, some great, bar scenes. There's a real basketball fandom here that they captivate. I know their women are going to be trying to beat the U.S. as well. So great week out here. I'm off tomorrow to Spain just to chill before we get back at it. Celtics will be back at it soon rather than later. And this was a fun week, a really special week, not just for basketball, but for sports as a whole. I think Paris just nailed it here. This was a great Olympic as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I watched literally everything there is to watch in the Olympics, so it was a lot of fun. And yeah, we'll be back. I think there won't be no more games coming up soon. I know I feel like there was not really ever an off season between the year and summer league, and now the Olympics. So there'll be a little bit of a break before the remainder of our coverage going into next fall. I'm continuing my podcast, New at Boston, 3 times a week throughout this slow period. So we'll find stuff to talk about.
Well, I know you'll probably go longer on him, but we do have quick news item. I want like a minute from you on Svi Mykhailiuk moving to the Jazz.
That was awesome. That's a good call, Bobby. Yeah, I did not see that coming, that he had a 4-year, $15 million contract. I'll say it now. I was talking to a European scout. There were people at Summer League, I think, that were thinking he might go overseas. And so I started thinking that's where he was headed. And I honestly didn't think we were going to see him in the NBA next year. And I didn't say anything because I didn't feel like sufficient sources. And I'm glad I didn't, because a 4-year, $15 million contract in Utah is just amazing for someone that really was not in any rotation last year and is not a young guy. He's been in the league for quite some time now, but
27, still got a little bit of game left.
I just more mean like he's not like a prospect, he's who he is. And we always heard he was great in practice. He always looked great shooting around, but we just didn't see him a lot. I mean, he looked good in the minutes that he played, but pretty cool that he got that opportunity. And it also kind of goes to show you that that the guys that took pay cuts to stay in Boston like all the veteran minimums, like Svi Mihailuk ended up getting paid way more than a lot of the guys that came back. And obviously they had to, but it just kind of shows you there might have been a bigger market out there for some of those players.
Yeah, and obviously he got a lot of praise for how he handled the last year. Quietly 38% in those 41 games from 3. So shooting's everything. He shot well enough to hang on. I don't know how much that 15 is guaranteed, but I'd assume he'll at least get this first year out of it. So credit to him sticking around. And it was a tough choice last offseason for him, whether to go to, I think it was Greece, or go to the Celtics. And Celtics told him probably not going to play much, but he came and won a championship. So Jazz, Celtics, be a big ring waiting for Svi.
Yeah, and we're seeing here that LeBron won MVP of the tournament. I'm surprised by that. I kind of knew it was coming, but Steph earned that, I feel like.
I wonder how they
Steph
decide that.
In my core, so maybe I'm a little biased here, but a little surprised.
Yeah, if there was a vote, I would have gone Steph, but not a bad choice for LeBron. He was special on this run. Still, in many ways, the best, most consistent player on this team of all-stars and the best players in the world, which is hard to imagine. What is this, his 4th gold? Oh, yeah, because he skipped 2020. Yeah. Well, good for LeBron. Davis looked good, too. We'll see what the Lakers can do this year, because those two guys are still at a high level here. But the team around them, we'll see.
Well, let's wrap it up here. Bobby, safe travels. Glad for you that you got to be in Paris for this really cool week. And we'll have more coverage coming up moving forward. I'll be going live tomorrow so we can talk more about this game and talk more about kind of what it means for Celtics context as well. But yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in.
On to LA 2028.
Wait, Ahmed's got an outro for us, I think.
No, he doesn't.
He said he was going to work on an outro.
He had a phenomenal game.
Phenomenal game.
Forfeit's out. I think it's an auction. That did not sound like a chair.
It was a freaking chair. It does sound like a chair.